Hi everyone, I want to show you a instructive endgame presentation today. With the white pieces, Grandmaster Pavel Tregubov, who was rated 2585 at the time, and with the black pieces, Russian Grandmaster Alexei Dreyev, 2652. This game is from the 2016 World Rapid. It was played 2 days after Christmas. So this is what real chess players do um, at Christmas time. Is they go to chess tournaments. Enjoy. This game, as you can see, is at the ending because that's what I want to focus on. Is the planning. Um, a lot of times, beginning players get decent positions, out of the opening and middle game, and then aren't really sure what they should be pursuing or what their goal and objective should be. And if you don't have a plan, just like in life, if you don't have a path to to get to somewhere, you'll wind up anywhere, and that's what happens as you blow a lot of games. And this position is black to move. Um, White, has his rook on the seventh rank, which is very important, and you can see the A pawn is attacked. But the most salient feature that stands out in this position is the passed C pawn. The rook is behind it on C8, right where it should be, and the plan for black suggests itself very clearly. And this is one of the reasons why I chose this position, because almost any beginning chess player can see that black should just push that C pawn right up the board. Okay, which is great. That's a good goal to have. But if you look at the defense, because you always want to check the defensive possibilities for that your opponent has, we can see that white's king is well within the square. If you don't know what that is, look up some of my endgame videos explaining what that is. But basically, if it was just a pure king and pawn ending, the white king would be able to get in front of the pawn and capture the pawn if the pawn just marched up the board. So let me just give you an example of the thought process here. So you're black, you recognize that that is a major trump in the position. You want to push the C pawn. You see that your A pawn is attacked by the rook on the seventh rank, but you do not really have the resources to protect the A pawn. And you definitely don't want to give up that A pawn, the A7 pawn, for your C6 pawn. So therefore, you should be willing to sacrifice that A pawn in order to push the C pawn up the board. You also recognize that after your A pawn, speaking from the black perspective, after your A pawn is captured, that the white A pawn on the fourth rank will be passed also. So you calculate that your pawn on the C file will be faster than the A pawn. So that's one thing. So we just want to determine that we don't want to waste time defending that pawn. We want to push the C pawn. At the same time, you recognize that the king, the white king on G1, will be able to stop the C pawn. All right. So you have to realize that you need your king to assist your C pawn in queening. But now there's a problem because you have a pawn on E5, white pawn on E5, so that stops any escape of by the black king, in assisting this pawn to promoting later on. Also, you see that the white rook is on the seventh rank, so that stops the king from coming around via F8 and E7. That lets you know that with proper play, your king will not be able to assist the C pawn. So, your idea of queening the C pawn is not really realizable, save an extraordinary blunder by white. But we have to assume that he will play decent chess here. So, you have to come up with, with another alternative. And the other alternative here is that you can use this C pawn as a decoy. Okay, advancing the c pawn will tie up one of white's pieces. It will either tie up this rook, forcing the rook to leave the 7th rank, or it will tie up this king. Okay, and the king will be forced to leave its safety and comfort on the king side. What that means is that once this king moves over to the c file to arrest this pawn, then these pawns will be vulnerable to attack. So that gives us an insight on what our plan should be. It should be to push the pawn up the board, but we know realistically that it may not queen. Alright, but then we can use it as a decoy to attack the other pawns. And then we also realize that in the process we may lose our pawn on the a file. But this is the only and correct plan in the position. So let's see how Dreev handled this position against Grandmaster Tregubov. c5, of course, I'm sure everybody could guess that move. King f1, c4, king e2, c3, and everything is going just as we planned. King d1, and we can see that the king is forced to come and stop the advance of the pawn, or else simply the pawn would become a queen. At this point, Dreev plays the move a5. Now this is not intended necessarily to save the pawn, but what black wants to do is force the white rook to leave the comfort of the 7th rank, and then in the process also blocks his own pawn from advancing. So in other words, Dreev knows that white will get a pass pawn on the a file, but he's trying to make it more difficult for him to advance. In other words, white will have to use tempi in trying to advance his pawn. So rook a7, and now good move here. Some players would rush and play this move, c2, which would be a mistake. Afterwards, white would be better, because there's no way to advance this pawn. And then, for instance, if you try to leave the file, then just simply king takes c2. So what happens is the tides reverse amazingly. Instead of white being tied up, it's actually black that's tied up, because now this pawn has to be protected. Alright, and say after a move like rook c5, and f4 can be played. Let's say f4, king f8, and we have a lot of play here for white. So this pawn is not to be pushed anymore. Remember, it's just a decoy, but we want it to be an effective decoy. We don't want to just lose the pawn for nothing. So at this point, Dreev played rook d8 check. Okay, this forces white to the c file with his king. Okay, so for instance, we tried to go back the other way, then simply c2 would be winning, because first of all, we can see the king is cut off on the d file, and then if he tried to get behind it, rook c1, then rook d1, and let's say king e2, then c1 queen would cost white his rook. So he has to go to either c2 or c1. This allows rook d2 check. The king takes c3. So we see the pawn has sacrificed itself, and we thank it for its service. Rook takes f2, g3, and we see now Dreev eating up these pawns on the back rank. But it's still not so clear. The reason is because of this pawn now. Rook takes a5. Of course, Dreev anticipated this, but again, the idea is to make white use as much time as possible in trying to queen that pass pawn. So now rook a2, getting behind the pass pawn, which is a normal principle in chess. Perhaps rook h3 attacking another pawn, or rook g2, ensuring that this h pawn gets passed, is even stronger. But he decided to get behind the pawn right away. This was met by rook a8. And the reason why I say that was better is because of the continuation. I was thinking that rook, because right at this moment, even though black has this cluster of pawns on the king side, he doesn't have a clear passed one at this point. So I was thinking that rook to g2, or rook h3, threatening the g3 pawn. So for example, let's say rook d5, with the idea, you know, of pushing this guy. At least, and of course a5 would happen, and then now the rook has to hustle to get back. And at least black now has this h5 pawn to push and clear. Actually, the h5 and h pawn and g pawn are in the clear blue. Of course, it's not easy getting over to the a file because you have moves like king b2. But then you check, king b3, and you have an interesting game. I mean, white can repeat here, but he doesn't have to repeat. He can go for it. For instance, playing a move like rook d4 with the idea of trying to get behind the pawn at some point. So very, very interesting position that benefit, you know, that could benefit you by studying it. So so after king c2, rook d2 check, king takes c3, rook takes f2, g3, rook takes h2, rook takes a5, and again I thought critical was rook g2, and Dreev just got behind the pawn. Again, this is a rapid game, so sometimes general principles can get in the way of concrete analysis. Here, Tregubov played a good move, which I like. A rook a8 check, king g7, and then rook a7. What's the idea? The idea is to play this move e6, exploiting the pin on f7. This is why Dreev plays king f8. So he gets out of the pin and he moves his king a little closer to the center. Alright, this rook on the 7th is very powerful because it restricts the king movement. Now here's another important moment in the game. Tregubov attacks the rook on a2 by playing king b3. Now this to me cost white an important tempi here, because it drives the rook to an aggressive square. Now if after king b3 the rook perhaps was forced to go back there to a1, a5, it probably wouldn't be a big deal. However, rook e2 is where the rook is driven to, and after a5 the pawns can be picked up with check. So a5, rook takes e3 check. So that's why instead of that move, instead of king b3, just simply push the pawns. Okay, a5. And again, with good play here, this is just a sample. Trying to promote the pawn. Black would probably be forced to just keep checking, because that passed pawn on the a file becomes just too dangerous. The game is looking like a draw. But after king b3, rook e2, now these pawns drop. e4, and again it's probably best for white at this point to just step back and not give up the e pawn with check. Okay, he gives up the e pawn, but not with check. Then the pawn can advance, and again, white would be able to probably save himself with the strength of this a pawn, becoming the queen, as the black rook would be relegated to just checking the getting behind the a pawn and just checking at a distance as much as possible here. Instead, Tregubov continued. Again, it's a natural move because after check, the king is closer to supporting the pawn instead of being cut off. So rook takes e5 check, king b6. Okay, not too bad, but he is getting harassed. Rook e6 check, king b5, rook e5 check, and we see this repetition going on. And now Dreev decides to pick up the other pawn. a6. At this point, he's determined that those 4 pawns should compensate for his loss of a rook, because there's no doubt that he will have to sacrifice his rook for that a pawn. So rook c7 happens, rook b3, king c6, and rook a3. a7, king g7, king b7, and now the pawn will promote. But we have 4 passed pawns, 4 passed pawns on the king side. So f4, and Tregubov promotes. Rook takes a8, king takes a8, g5, king b7. Notice how far the king is away. f3, king b6, and just simply f2. King b6, of course, is a major error, because after f2, there is no way to stop the pawns from connecting. For instance, rook c1, then simply g4, and then the rook just has to wait on f1 till the pawns just advance. Instead of king b6, rook c1 right away allows a little bit of fight, but it's still the same thing after g4. And it's well known that once you get 2 pawns connected together on the 6th rank against the rook, that is strong enough. But there's not only the 2 pawns, but there's 2 additional pawns on the f and h files that can easily be pulled up and reserved. So that was a interesting endgame. Tregubov did resign after f2, and I just wanted to share that with you, because these are practical endgames that happen from time to time. I think, again, the culprit in that game was, I'll go back to the critical continuation, I think it was king b3. I think the game probably should have ended in a draw, but just losing these pawns on the king side, I think, without really needing to cost white dearly at this point. Losing all those pawns and underestimating the pawns that black had remaining. Again, I think instead of king b3 there, just let sleeping dogs lie and just play a5. And notice how in this variation the pawns don't drop. Now black can keep checking, and again the game probably just ends in a draw. And I just wanted to show you that that's probably the logical outcome, because the passed pawn is too strong on the a file, and even though white's pawns are broken up, they're there, and the fact that they're there, they can stop the advance of the black pawns. But in the game continuation, the pawns are just lost, and even the queen is not enough. Well, actually, he didn't get the queen. The rook sacrificed itself. But so a rook is not enough to stop all those pawns. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was instructive, and I'll see you guys on the next video.